All right. How you doing, Melissa?
Great,
Yes,
Pete.
caught
How are
you right
you?
at the right time. Good. um, so I'm Peter Pisano with Compass Real Estate, and I'm going to be interviewing Melissa Lee today with the law offices of David Camiel. Melissa, if you'd like to say a few things about yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Pete. Thanks for having me on. It's great to talk about all this good stuff, fill people in, see if people have questions. I'm a real estate attorney. That's all I've been doing since I started practicing about 8 years ago. We help people buy and sell, do condo conversions, mortgages, things like that. That's all we focus on. So it's our specialty. And we cover the entire state. We have offices in Burlington, Chestnut Hill, and Southborough.
Awesome. Awesome. So I know obviously I follow your social accounts, and I know you've been swamped. I know you're crazy
Yeah.
busy. From a realtor's point of view, we absolutely appreciate everything that you're doing. I know you guys work probably 10 times harder than we work in the big picture, and I applaud you and really appreciate what you're doing for everybody.
Thank you. Appreciate to hear it. We do what we can and we do what we have to do, but it's been brutal the last couple of weeks. It's just, the spring market, the timing, this is very seasonal, as you know, and we're heading into the busy season, and refinances are up because the rates were historically low, February, early March. And so between all of the refinances and the normal seasonal pickup, we've been dealing with, everything as a fallout from the pandemic. And there's just been, as you know, everyone's profession, so many drastic changes, but the attorneys are stuck sorting out things like registry closures, new contracts, impossible documents to obtain, people being in quarantine, and we've all just had to roll with that and then try to educate our clients and our partners as to what's going on top of everything, and dealing with folks who, I feel like one of the things as a real estate attorney is kind of just being a therapist. I feel like sometimes helping people through emotional times, and even for investors, as you know, Pete, it can get really emotional. Imagine added emotion for people who raise their kids at a place or hope to raise their kids at a place, and things like that. And then people are freaking out with good reason. And so part of our job is just helping to coach people through that. So we've definitely had our hands full. And then we've been doing in-person closings, which is, on its own handful, because we have to worry about, safety protocols, disinfecting things, replenishing pens, like even little things like that have just been keeping us on our toes. So yeah, it's been a wild the last couple of weeks.
I can
Yeah.
imagine. So it feels like the policies are constantly changing. Every day it feels like the governor's coming on, who's essential, who's not essential.
Mm-hmm.
So what are you seeing from your point of view as far as right now, today, what does a closing process look like right now?
Yeah, and so I guess just from like day one, all the way to the end, I guess to kind of highlight what's changed, if that helps. But
Yes.
even from putting in an offer, even attaching like a COVID-19 addendum to an offer, or putting in the offer that it's subject to a mutually agreeable purchase and sale and COVID-19 addendum, just to make sure that gets into the final contract, is what we're doing for sure on all the deals that come through our office. And then one thing we're running into too is the inability to obtain things from the cities and towns, because a lot of their offices are closed. So we're finding workarounds, and I think we can probably go through each of these things and talk more in depth if you want. But we're
Yes.
finding workarounds for the fact that we can't get water readings, tax figures. We can't get smoke certificates from a lot of the fire departments. So we're finding workarounds for that. We're also, still notarizing documents in person, which we're doing by virtue of kind of like, it's kind of funny, but like a drive-through closing. You literally drive up to my office, stay in your car, and we handle the closing that way, because that seems to be the safest way to do things.
Yeah.
And then, we're managing the fact that registries are closed for most intents and purposes, but they are online, so there is a more limited capacity. So we're working within that restriction. And then we are just working with people like our title insurance agent partners to get something called gap insurance. So if a registry actually fully closes down, which we saw in some regard this week with Suffolk Registry,
Yeah, I saw that.
we can actually close and disperse and it's just, and you guys can get paid, and the buyer can get their keys, and the seller gets paid, all while the registry is actually closed. So we found workarounds for all of that. So,
Wow.
from day one to the final moment, there's been changes, and we figure out ways to adapt to all of it.
Wow, impressive. No, that's great. That's great.
Yeah.
I mean, it's something that I feel like you guys just keep getting hit with, and it's just kind of uncharted territory right now, and you just keep going with whatever gets the
Yeah.
deal done, which is
Yep.
awesome.
Yep.
I had a client reach out to me that wasn't able to make the call, but they wanted to know. Basically, they're getting into a position where they need to go through probate. Um,
Mm.
and if you want to kind of touch on, as far as what probate is, and their actual question is, should they wait until we have like a better understanding of what's going to happen with the courts and probate courts before they begin the process, or should they just jump
Mm.
into it now?
So they're going to list the property, but it has to go through probate to be able to effectively sell it.
Right.
Got it.
Mhm.
Yeah. That's a good question. I actually will have more information on later this week, because the continuing ed in Massachusetts for lawyers is doing something on probate. I kind of work ancillary to probate. I never worked in the probate courts, but what the probate is when, if somebody passes away without any, well, even with the will, you still have to go to probate court and have a judge decide who's going to administer the estate and who gets what assets from a person who's passed away. And it's already a really slow process normally, and it's already kind of like an arcane, old school way of processing things.
Mhm.
Always a source of frustration for real estate lawyers, agents, sellers. And so, all the courts are basically closed right now, and that was since kind of 3 weeks ago when Governor Baker decided to close them. And some courts have gone digital as far as doing some sort of hearings on the phone or online, but I don't think probate court's been doing anything,
Mhm.
unfortunately, and I'm not sure when that's going to change. And
Yeah.
so here's the thing, right? I mean, if you wanted to list the property now, you would just have to be careful to explain to the buyer that you don't really know when this is going to happen. It might be a couple months, and just be smart about, just disclosing that, and smart about the purchase and sale contract saying, we're going to have, we the sellers are going to have leave to extend to make sure that this goes through, because we can't control when and how quickly the probate court affects this. So it's definitely a smart question on their part. I think if you want to list now, fine. I just think we have to be mindful of practicalities that we're, the limitations that we're forced to deal with.
Sure. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And again, these are uncharted waters right now that
Hmm.
just kind of
Yeah.
learning on the go, right? Um,
Hmm.
so let's dig into a little bit with the closing process. If
Yep.
I'm getting ready to close on a property, let's just say we have a closing, next week. We're at a point where we've got commitment and clear to close. What does that process look like now, getting to the actual closing table or the drive-through?
Yeah. Yeah. And so basically lenders have been backed up on their own too, and nothing wrong. They're not doing anything wrong. They're overloaded as well and dealing with a myriad of issues on their side. And so, if we have the commitment in, that's great. Right now things are still closing that were put under agreement pre-COVID-19 days. And so they don't necessarily have the extra language in the contract that would be helpful, because some things that we're seeing, and thankfully I haven't seen this happen at all here in Massachusetts. It's just almost like an urban legend now. I heard a story about somebody who signed their paperwork, and of course it's their closing, and what happens after a buyer signs is that their lender wires the loan money to the closing attorney, and then once all of the money is in, the deed is recorded, the seller's mortgage gets paid off, and the seller gets their proceeds. But what happened was the lender didn't have the money to send, and it was because they're having liquidity problems in the market. And so every so often we're hearing stories about different lenders who are kind of running out of money, right? And don't panic, that's not like across the board or anything. And a lender is probably a better person to explain how and why that's happening. But we're also seeing banks pull commitments, right? They'll give you a commitment being something on paper saying, we're ready to give you this money. There's no more hoops you have to jump through. we're ready to go. But if something changes in the lender side that they can't control because of the tumultuous market that they're in, some lenders have been pulling commitments, or in the commitment letter it says, subject to having enough liquidity on closing to send you money. So it's kind of still a little up in the air in like a scary kind of way. Don't be scared, but just be cautious, and make sure you're talking to your lawyer, talking to your attorney, lender about that stuff. And so going forward, for contracts that were written with the COVID-19 addendum in it, we are trying to address those kinds of things. So God forbid a buyer lost their job between commitment and closing, they wouldn't normally have the right to terminate and get their deposit back in a normal circumstance. But we're putting language in contracts now that would allow the buyer to still terminate and get their deposit back if they got laid off like the day of closing or something, God forbid. And so that's the thing. People, we could obviously not see this happening. And so contracts that were signed before, there was no way we would have put any of this language in. And if we tried to get a seller attorney to agree to any of these things, they would have thought we were crazy.
Right.
So, the world changed in a blink of an eye, and we're all now agreeing to have these provisions in the contract. So I think that's the thing. If you're a buyer, it's hard to know, but if you think that your job is in a precarious position at all, be really communicating that to everybody, because your attorney can do some things to help protect you, and maybe extend your commitment or something while the closing is pending, just to cover you, to make sure you can terminate and get your deposit back. So in the event that people are indeed closing, which we are seeing, it's like 99% of stuff is going through and everyone's okay, then what we do is we have buyers send us a copy of their IDs ahead of time, or text us a photo of it, because we don't want to touch things together. We don't try to be near each other at all. When we can give people copies of the documents in advance, we do, and that way people can look at everything and see what questions they have, get them answered before they even walk in. But again, their lender partners are under a lot of stress, and so that's not always possible. So at the closing, people come in. Only people who have to sign are allowed in the room. There's no, sorry, Pete, but no agents allowed in the room. No lender, sometimes loan officers come. No
Yeah.
kids, which is tough. And obviously there's exceptions, right? We're not like meanies. It's just the way we're trying to keep everyone safe.
Right.
And so, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
But people come in. If they want to bring their own blue pens, that's great, because they have to be blue. We will provide unused pens, but we're going to throw them out or have you take them home anyway. So if you want to bring a blue
Yeah.
pen, bring gloves. I have some extra gloves, but those are kind of a scarce resource now. So if you have them, bring
Right.
them. And so traditionally what we've been doing is just kind of trying to mark off where people need to sign, date, and initial, and then putting the stack of paper on the other end of the table 6 feet away and trying to do the closing. And then now we've turned it into this drive up thing where, basically, we have some covered garages that make this a little bit easier on a day like today, for instance, where it's rainy and kind of cold. But we've got legal size clipboards, looking for them. I don't have it in the frame, but huge clipboards. And we just cut the papers there, have the buyers drive up. I still think it's nice for the buyers to use gloves, because I'm going to have to sanitize those clipboards, which is fine, but it's just better for everyone. And again, same thing with the pens. If you bring your own, it's even better. And I can at least stand on the other side of the window of your car and explain to you what the documents are, which is a little bit easier actually than sitting on the other side of a table, because I can't really see what you're looking at. And those documents, closing package is like 2 inches thick, and it's all very complicated and not easy to understand. And my job, what I love doing, is showing people exactly what it means, and I can't really do that from 20 feet away. So if I'm on the other side of a window, I can at least say, okay, this is that document, this is what it means, this is what you have to do next, and give them the information they need that way. And that seems to be the best way to do it. And we have sellers just drop their documents off. Even before all of this pandemic, sellers were hardly attending closings, which makes sense.
Right.
So that really hasn't changed a ton. But in case sellers really want to come, we're just saying, sorry, you can't, get us
Yeah.
your stuff, which is not too much of an ask on their side either. And
Right.
then what we do is we record everything electronically at the Registry of Deeds. So we just scan in the documents and upload it to the registry website. 90% of closings can be done that way. There are some closings where the physical documents have to be presented in person to the Registry of Deeds. And because of safety concerns, they don't let people just walk in and drop documents off anymore. So mail or overnight FedEx, UPS is the way we've been doing it. And that's works for most of the registries across the state. But Suffolk Registry, like I kind of mentioned earlier, they had a very skeleton crew going in there every day at the courthouse. And apparently even one of those people got the virus, and so unbeknownst to them had been coming with, um, being contagious, and so they had to shut down the entire building for a full week. No
Wow.
one's coming in, so all the FedExes were just kind of piling up, and no one saw this coming because it was like the Sunday night they told us. And so I, for instance, had a package that went out Friday night to Monday delivery, and it's like bam, like that right away I have to deal with, how to handle this. And so that's when the gap coverage came in. So what we did was talk to the title insurance company, we talked to the lender, got their blessings, and then we talked to the seller, had the seller sign an affidavit himself, not through his attorney but himself, overnight that to us. And it just says that, what it means is that we obviously can't get the deed recorded in the buyer's name until they reopen. And so in the meantime, we want to make sure nobody else has any rights to this property, that nobody else is trying to file a deed, that nobody else is trying to file a lien or any sort of mortgage on the house before us. So they just sign an affidavit swearing that they're not aware of anyone who's going to do anything like that, and indemnifying the buyer, the lender, and our office in case anything like that happens in the meantime. And so, that went through on Tuesday, and the buyers got their keys, the seller, got the paid, the brokers got paid, and it's kind of just like it's closed, right?
Yeah.
And when the registry opens on Monday, it'll be official, but for all intents and purposes, it's done. And so that's a nice thing that we have to work with when the registry is fully closed. So that's what they're basically looking like. Yeah.
Wow. Well, yeah. I mean, it sounds obviously it's not business as usual. And as more people join this, I just want to let everybody know we are on Zoom, and if you scroll to the bottom at the there's a little chat bubble, and anybody that's got any questions from Melissa or myself, feel free to type in the box if you have any questions. One thing that I'm starting to notice, just because I think I told you recently, I just put a listing on the market, a vacant single family in Revere, and we have multiple offers on the table right now. And one thing that I'm noticing is some of the pre-approval letters before obviously the outbreak and the virus started, the pre-approvals were good for 90 days. I'm seeing some pre-approvals that were issued back in February, which I'm now calling the lenders, which I normally call the lenders anyways, but now I'm calling, asking them if they're still confident in applying to fulfill underwriting's needs. So for any agents out there or any sellers out there, make sure your agent is checking with the lender as of right now before accepting an offer to make sure
That's a good
that the
point.
lender has still reviewed employment, just because unfortunately unemployment is on the rise right now, and a lot of people
And
are losing
yeah.
their jobs. So make sure that the buyer is employed. I'm still waiting on a few confirmations right now. The
Yeah.
agents have said so, but I want that clarification from the lender.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I think just also, I think people should maybe think about the closing timeline a little longer than we were used to. The 30-day closings was kind of the standard. Of course, people could always close in a longer time period if they wanted to, but usually sellers want to close ASAP. But that's not practical right now. I'd probably say 45 days to 60. Of course, it's all dependent on particular details, and I think one thing too, when you're putting an offer together, is to put the commitment date closer to the closing than we used to, just
Yeah.
to kind of help build in a protection for the buyer. And hopefully sellers understand why we're doing that too. And then when buyers are talking to their lenders, they should be asking about rate lock periods, because
Right.
there's different time frames. There's, 30-day rate locks, 45-day, 60-day, 90-day rate locks, and they all come with different terms and pricing. But it might be something to think about because we're not closing in 30 days as much as we want to.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that makes sense. I mean, it's the lending side of things. I feel like it's so volatile right now, and
It is.
I feel
Yeah.
for the lenders out there, because again, it's an atmosphere that's an environment that's like yours is just constantly changing with
Yeah.
policies and so forth. It's very volatile right
Absolutely.
now.
It's kind of like every time there's a press conference, it changes the markets and the mortgage industry, and they have to like see what's going on every single time. Yeah, it's got to be tough for those guys. I give them a lot of credit.
Yeah, definitely. Um, I think I'm not sure, we might be running out of time. I thought I set this for 40 minutes, but it might be a half hour. So in case I lose you, um, we'll continue talking, but as far as if I'm a purchaser, if I'm buying or I'm selling right now, what's the biggest advice that you would want to give to me from both perspectives in
Buyers
terms
and
of,
sellers.
yeah, as a buyer or seller?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. I think that one thing I'm saying is kind of, if there's any way to sell the house vacant, I just think that's so huge. I don't know, that's obviously not possible for everybody. I just think it takes a lot of pressure off the sellers worrying about people coming in, and then the buyers, feeling more comfortable. If I were a buyer, I'd be flocking. I was actually thinking of trying to search like keywords like vacant, and just because we're looking kind of casually right now ourselves. And I think for a buyer, what I would say, kind of like I already said, just be in communication and tell your lawyer and your lender everything. They're there to work for you. They owe you a fiduciary duty. They are, responsible to look out for your financial best interest, and there's confidentiality with your lawyer. So if you're worried about losing a job, you're worrying about having some sort of issue like that, tell us, so we can protect you. And otherwise, I would say to buyers, and this is something that you can speak to probably better than I, Pete, but I think buyers are trying to look for discounts right now, and I just don't think they're there. And I think that buyers are shooting themselves in the foot by thinking that they're going to be getting like 20% off these asking prices.
Yeah,
It's just
yeah,
not the case. I think people need to understand this is not 2008.
right.
2008 was caused by irresponsible people in the real estate industry doing greedy things, like
Yeah.
that, to put it
hmm
like simply. We built this house of cards that fell on itself and, nosedove the home values. But that's just not what's happening right now.
No.
It couldn't be further from the same thing. It's so completely different that, to say to themselves, oh, I was going to buy, but why don't I just wait and see how the prices come down? I don't think, I mean, nobody has a crystal ball, but I don't think it's going to happen. And, you and I, Pete, were talking right before the recording started about how we're still seeing people pay asking price and still going over asking. So the market hasn't shifted, at least not yet, to any sort of buyer's market, not even a balanced market. It's still a seller's market.
Yeah.
And so if you need to buy or you want to buy, there's no real, like, I don't think, reason to wait, you know?
Right. Yeah,
Right?
if you're in a position to buy, interest rates are still really low.
Hmm.
Obviously, safety first, but if you're in a
Right.
position with an opportunity, go for it. I mean, I'm showing houses, I'm connecting sellers and buyers on Zoom right now, and just asking I'm just asking the, buyers to I'm asking the sellers, I'm sorry, to do a private showing, or not necessarily a private showing, but just take their phone, turn the
Smart.
camera on, and take us to the property. And we're having some pretty good success with that. And this was a situation where there's a property where the seller wants to sell it. They don't necessarily want to list it right now, but they're open to offers. And that actually brings me to another point. Are you seeing now with the virtual showings, are you seeing contingencies that are subject to satisfactory walkthroughs, or are you seeing just straightforward deals where you're able to just do the deal without any kind
More
of confusion.
straightforward deals. Yeah, I think that people are still finding a way to go in, or at least feeling confident enough in having seen it virtually or whatnot
Yeah.
to just move forward without it. I haven't seen it personally yet. I
Mhm.
don't I imagine that might be smart for certain people to say, because there is kind of this sight unseen purchasing happening right now for, good reason in some ways. But no, I haven't seen it yet. I think that folks are being safe, but I think that what people seem to be doing are seller leaves for a couple hours, buyer comes in, if you could put booties on their shoes and gloves and things like that and walk around carefully. And then I've seen it where, folks like you, the agents, stay outside and FaceTime the buyers while they're inside, because it's just less people, and that way you're not like up in the buyer's like face when you're in there.
Right.
That kind of stuff. But it seems pretty straightforward. I was actually surprised when I feel like stuff started to hit the fan a few weeks ago and everything was blowing up, that people kind of started sending me in, you know, offers. My buyer got their offer accepted. My seller got is accepting an offer. Just kind of normal. Like,
Right.
like,
Yeah.
just like nothing happened. I'm like,
Right.
okay, I'm glad, I'm grateful, but I was kind of surprised. So people are still doing it for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, before all this happened, I would see, specifically with investment properties where some sellers would do a sight unseen offer based on just the numbers and kind of subject to a walkthrough, which
Hmm.
as an agent, I never liked the subject to an walkthrough just because that the deal could literally die if
It's
they
too
don't like
open
the paint
ended.
color. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think obviously we're on, during these times, it's kind of all that we have to go off of. So,
We
and
all have to
obviously
get
there's
kind of
more,
creative.
yeah,
Yeah, a little more flexible. Yeah.
right, exactly.
Yep. Yep.
So, um, but just as far as where you see, I know you don't have a crystal ball, but I
Mm-hmm.
always like to get an opinion of others out there and what they think is going to end up happening with the market.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you see the market going?
I think that people, like I said, think that there's going to be some sort of discount, right? But I think that what's happening is that the lack of inventory is getting even worse, So I think a tightening inventory in a marketplace with the low interest rates still, I don't really see the prices doing anything crazy. I think that, people might be able to find a good deal here and there, because potentially less people are going to be qualified for financing, which is kind of scary, but kind of good in a way. But I know, for instance, that, credit score needs to be higher than it was a few weeks ago, that different metrics like loan to value ratio are tightening up. And so there might be less qualified buyers as well. So I do think there might be some chances for, maybe, like I said, a good deal or something, but I just think it's going to stay a seller's market. I don't know. That's just kind of my take on it right now.
Yeah,
And I'm
yeah,
looking for a deal. Like, I want to buy an investment property. I'm not seeing
yeah,
any really good deals.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think you hit it on the head. I think it comes down to relevancy and people's position. If they're in a position to sell, if people have to sell a property, then maybe they're open to a lesser amount in order to achieve the goal. Same thing with
Mm,
buyers. If you're in a position to purchase, the opportunities are there. So
yeah.
I think it all comes down to supply and demand. Um, what I think kind of things end up kind of being even in terms of the amount of
Mm,
inventory versus buyers.
hmm.
So, but again, it's we'll see what happens if the inventory doesn't climb and the demand doesn't climb. Then I see prices staying strong.
Yep.
But obviously the inventory percentage will probably drop quite a bit.
People
So
tend to get creative. If people want to make a deal happen, there's all kinds of things that people can think about. There's even
yeah,
like, we can talk about like even like seller financing and things like
right,
that. Like,
right,
people can do it. It's just kind
yeah,
of like, I think people need to like ask questions, rely on their professionals, really like talk to their attorneys and their agents and really think it through.
yeah,
Don't just kind of just assume I can't do it. There's ways
right,
to get this stuff done. You just have
yeah.
to be smart and creative about it.
Yeah, we're potentially putting a deal under agreement right now, and basically the seller is taking a new job, which he still has confirmation to move to New Hampshire to take a new job in August, I believe. And he said, I'm more than willing to sell it as long as the buyer will give me that period of time to close. Like we can
Hmm.
close in July if that works. The buyer's totally open to it. So
Yeah,
just going back to creative ways to get the deal done, that's something that's definitely
exactly.
working
Use
right
and
now.
occupancy agreements, or
Yep.
all kinds of different scenarios. It's all doable. We've always had these tools in our tool belt, and
Right.
we're just kind of sharpening them and adding new tools in as well to get everything
Right.
done. But like you
Right.
said, if you're in a position to buy, it's totally doable. If you need to sell, it's still doable. And realtors were just considered real estate agents essential by the governor just the other day, so hopefully that'll make things easier for you guys and for the buyers and sellers out there who need you. So
Right.
that's positive too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But yeah, if you guys have any more questions, like I think the only thing we probably didn't talk about is just like, stuff about like not having smoke certificates come in, or not getting water readings and tax figures and stuff. But I guess just leave it to say that we figured out solutions for this stuff. And so if you have
Mhm.
any other concerns about different roadblocks that you're envisioning along the way, just reach out, or let me know if you have questions or concerns about anything, and I can happily
Yeah.
explain how we've managed to evolve, what we're doing, and maybe help you figure out whatever the roadblock is that you're seeing.
How do people get in touch with you, Melissa?
So you guys can call my cell phone, 617-833-5762, email Emily at Camiel Law, MLEE at CAMIELLAW.com, or, Facebook, Instagram, or whatever. So I can probably post some of my contact information along with this
Yes.
video.
Yes, we definitely will. We definitely will. I think we're running out of time for now, but I appreciate you hopping on. And on behalf of all the realtors out there, we appreciate you going to battle for us and our clients every day as well.
Thanks, Pete. Thanks for having me on. It was a great chat. Thank you.
Thank you. Stay safe. Take care.
You too. Talk to you. Bye.
Bye-bye.